Alright, so what's going on, guys? It's episode 9 of the Berserk Memorial Edition. Let's get right into it. So we start off with Griffith's dream as he's running towards the kingdom. He's a little child and he's chasing the kingdom off in the distance, but then he wakes up and we get a close-up of his eye and, a close-up of his body as well, and it's absolutely desecrated. Skin is peeling off. It looks like he hasn't been fed for weeks. It looks like he's been brutalized and tortured, and he looks like just a complete mess right now. But then we see a crack in the wall, and we see these dark, oozing spirits come through. And they're like, "We wish to have an audience with you, Your Majesty." And then Griffith sees some images, and we're not quite sure what's happening, but we see the various members of the Band of the Hawk, and it almost looks like some kind of nightmarish-like reality. And at the very end, we see a man with a dark cloak saying, "We're waiting for you." And of course, for us manga readers, we know that this is Void, and this is a premonition of the eclipse to come. Next up, we see an apostle walking through the forest, and some various villagers who are rather scared by this notion. Now, I do like how they were like, "Oh, we should contact the Holy See about this." Now, it says Holy See in the Memorial Edition, but in the actual movie, it says, "Let's contact the Vatican," which, doesn't make sense within the Berserk universe. Obviously, Miro was drawing a parallel between the Vatican and the Holy See, but, to say Vatican instead of Holy See just kind of doesn't make really any sense at all. We then see Griffith's Baylets floating in the water, very ominous, and then we're transported to the Band of the Hawk. They're sleeping, they look really weary and tired, and even Casca looks a little bit tired as well. Now, Judo comes up to Casca and tells her that Rickard found out where Griffith is being kept. But before they could do anything about it, the camp is attacked by some mysterious people. And we find out that the attack is being led by none other than Salat. Now, Salat looks like he's got the advantage on Casca, he's got her down on the ground, he's threatening to kill her, but just in the nick of time, Guts returns and saves her life. Now, not easily deterred, Salat decides to take out his Arumi and decides to cut up Guts. But Guts creates a whirlwind that stops the attack and pushes Salat back. Now, Salat, realizing that he's undermanned right now, and he's got no chance against the hulking Guts, decides to run away with his tail between his legs. Now, the very next day, Casca's taking Guts to a hill, and she wants to talk to him. Now, before this talk actually happens, Guts has a bit of a flashback here, where he recalls a conversation that he had with the Band of the Hawk, in which they told him that Griffith was captured 1 year ago. Incidentally enough, it was a day after Guts left the Band of the Hawk. Now, Casca tells Guts to defend himself, and she starts attacking. And while she's attacking him, she says that it's all his fault. The reason that Griffith lost his way is because he was depending on Guts, and Guts left him high and dry. And Guts is like, "No, this doesn't sound like Griffith. Griffith is a self-independent person. He doesn't need anyone else by his side. He has ambitions and dreams." But Casca reiterates the point that Griffith is no good without Guts. And with this stunning revelation, Guts doesn't defend himself from Casca's sword thrust, and it goes right into his abdomen, then grabs onto the sword as Casca pulls it right out. Now, Casca, having to deal with all the trauma of the situation, just can't handle it, and starts to walk to the edge of the cliff, and begins to pass out. Guts obviously wants to save her life, so he reaches down, he grabs her, and he pulls her back up. And it's funny, he's like, "That's it, no more going by the edge of cliffs for you." Which is funny because every time she goes by the edge of a cliff, she's always falling off of it. Now, after the whole incident, they have a one-on-one moment, and they both start to let their defenses down, and then eventually Guts kisses Casca on the forehead, and then they start to make out, and one thing leads to another, and bammo, Guts scores. Now, there is a difference, and we get another 6 minutes of new animation here, guys. So if you're keeping track at home, we got 25 minutes of new animation to date. So through the first 9 episodes, we essentially got 1 episode of new animation. So I'm actually quite pleased with this. This is actually fantastic news. And this goes into detail about what happens in the Wounds chapter, particularly the part when Guts is having sex with Casca and he starts having the visions and nightmares of when Donovan raped him. And while I like this whole sequence, that one scene where, Guts is a kid and he's tied up and he's on the ground, and then they show Donovan behind him. I don't know. Something about the way that they drew Donovan here kind of made him seem a little awkward, to be honest with you. I don't know. Something about this just doesn't look quite right to me, but it's very scary nonetheless, and that's kind of the point of the whole situation. I don't know. Maybe it's just Donovan's face or something, or I don't know. It just looks really weird to me. And then we get a very nice scene here of Guts choking a childlike version of himself, and then when he comes to, he realizes that he's actually choking Casca in real time. After snapping himself out of this, he starts to panic. He's in a bit of a delirium right now, and he's like, that vile pig Donovan, like, how could Gambino let him do that to me? And then he goes through a bevy of emotions, and Casca not really understanding what's going on here because he's just kind of rambling about incoherent things, thinks that it was Gambino that was the one that abused him, but Guts is like, no, it wasn't Gambino. Gambino was different. He was my dad. He was there to protect me, but he was drunk all the time, and all he cared about was his dog. So Guts is venting a lot of his emotions here, and I love that they added these scenes because it really showcases how even though Guts has sort of moved on with his life, there's still these remnants of his past that he hasn't let go of yet. And because he's finally venting these frustrations to Casca, it's very therapeutic for him. It's a way of him sort of getting some of this stuff off of his chest and sort of reconciling all the atrocities that have happened in his life. Now, eventually, Guts is crying by the waterfall, and then we have that very picturesque moment of when Casca comes from behind him and gives him a hug. And that moment in the manga is probably one of the best panels in the entire Berserk manga. Not so much in terms of like the detail, but just in terms of like what it means to both Guts and Casca as characters. Both of these characters are so proud and so strong and never let their defenses down, but in this moment here, with both of them not wearing any clothing, kind of showcases the fact that they're becoming vulnerable for each other for the better, so that they can help each other out, so that they don't have to bear these burdens alone anymore. This moment is so essential for Casca's development as well, because you finally get to see her let go of that picturesque vision of Griffith that she had in her mind and start to give herself into Guts. Start to believe more in herself and more in the possibilities of the future. And then Casca's like, I've given you so many wounds over the years. It's time that you give me one of your wounds. And then she licks the blood off of his abdomen. And then again, we have a very picturesque scene of when they're both making out on the grass like this. Very reminiscent of this scene in the manga. And then after that, we sync up with the movie once more, where Casca's asking Guts if he's going to leave the Band of the Hawk again. And he's like, well, why don't you come with me? And of course, she looks a little bit indecisive right here. She's not really sure that's the best move for her at this point. I mean, she's devoted her whole life to Griffith, but yet, at this moment, the man that she loves is asking her to leave. And then we end the episode with the two making out once more. So I absolutely love the 6 minutes, guys. Another great episode. Animation was really good. The scene with Donovan looked a little weird, and some of the faces that Guts was making as he was like crying and lamenting the fact that Gambino sold him to Donovan, some of those scenes looked a little bit awkward, but for the majority, it looked really nice. I love the content. It added a lot to the backstories of Guts and Casca, and with episode 10 coming next, guys, we're going to get to see the Skull Knight. So tell me what you thought of this episode. Tell me what you thought of the new content. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip side.